Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Green Flag. I'm your host, Lucas Wacker, and along with fuck me, holy shit! I keep on getting mixed up, and alongside me, as always. Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Green Flag. I'm your host, Lucas Wacker, and alongside me, as always, we have got Kyle Cushman, bringing you the latest and greatest in the world of motorsports. And another busy weekend as all three series are back once again for the second weekend in a row. We've got NASCAR, Formula One, and IndyCar, and lots of action on track in different parts of the world this time. We've got IndyCar at a different track compared to NASCAR this week in Road America, NASCAR in Kentucky, and we've got F1 still in the same place as last weekend, calling it the Styrian Grand Prix. And lots of other news to catch you up on, along with a all-star race preview for the NASCAR Cup Series coming this week on Thursday. So lots of stuff to talk about on today's episode. So we can kind of get right into it, I guess. We've got the Kentucky race review. It is what it is with Kentucky. It's a mile and a half track, and I wish they never repaved it. But, you know, it was better when it wasn't repaved, but we'll take what we can get. We're just happy that the sport's back, I guess. So starting off with news that kind of broke after our show last week, we had Jimmie Johnson coming back this week. We speculated last week that, you know, maybe he'd miss 2, maybe 3 races, but considering with the 14-day quarantine, but this it changed pretty quickly on us after the show. So Jimmie Johnson tested negative for COVID-19 2 times within 24 hours. So under NASCAR's rules and regulations, that means he is fit to race. Kind of an interesting time. I didn't, especially after like 5 days since he tested positive. So I was kind of surprised that he would test negative that quickly. So it seemed kind of suspicious, I'd say, a little bit.
Well, it's just kind of like you don't know when you get it exactly, especially when you're asymptomatic, like it seemed like Johnson was. So for all he knows, he could have had it 5-6 days previous and just didn't know. And so that's probably why he had the negative test so quickly after the positive test came back.
Yeah, it makes the most sense. I mean, we're happy to see Jimmie Johnson back. It sucks that he missed his final Brickyard, but he had put in a strong performance for most of the race on Sunday. So it was it didn't seem like anything over the past week had hampered his ability behind the wheel of a race car. So that's good to see for Jimmie Johnson. And we'll start off. Kyle Busch on the pole. He got the random draw, trying to turn his season around. Didn't really happen, but we'll get to that. He held on for the first 9 laps, and then Eric Almirola came out of nowhere kind of and shocked us all and had a really, really fast car early on in the race, dominated stage 1 and even into stage 2 there for a little bit. Like in our fantasy preview last week, I said we should stay away from Almirola because –
and I agreed.
Yeah, it just didn't seem like it would be a track that he's statistically been good on. And obviously that 10 team's kind of rolling here a little bit. It didn't quite get the finish that his early run performance showed, but had a fast and strong car early. It looked like he was going to be the dominant car, maybe the car to beat, but track position is king at this racetrack, and once you lose it, it's very difficult to get it back, and that was the case for many drivers today. And Almirola actually led a race-high 128 laps of the 267 laps. That's the most laps he's ever led in his damn career. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy
to think that he's never led that many because, you know, I think to Chicagoland a couple of years ago where he seemed like he had a really, really fast car and didn't quite get the laps lead count there, but that just shows you how strong this 10 car was on Sunday. He wins stage 1, gets another playoff point added to his resume, and early on in stage 1 there a little bit too, we saw Hamlin struggling, and this is one that we did predict. We didn't think that 11 car would be too quick this week, and we were proved right, and this was definitely a week to stay away from in your fantasy lineups because that 11 car just didn't have speed, and for the most part, Gibbs didn't have speed except for Martin Truex Jr. It was pretty surprising compared to what we've seen in previous years. I don't know if it's because the race was moved to a day race this year instead of a night race. Maybe that had some effect on it, but Truex was the only one out of that JGR stable that could even compete today or on Sunday. So kind of surprising there. What are your thoughts on that a little bit, Kyle?
Yeah, it was very surprising, and I think that obviously finish excluded is probably the biggest storyline to take out of this race is the fact that the only JGR car that had speed was Martin Truex Jr., and then if you want to include it as well, Christopher Bell. But Kyle Busch was all right for not even 3/4, like 2/3 of the day. And then he started to fade once he had some, I believe it was shock issues when he almost spun out and stuff like that. But Eric Jones, non-factor all day, barely even in the top 15. Denny Hamlin, same thing, recovered to finish 12th. But both of those were non-factors the entire day, and to the point where I don't think they were in the top 10 once. So for those guys, especially going into a track in a weekend where we expected Joe Gibbs to kind of reign dominant, it was very surprising to see, especially with the guy starting at the back and Martin Truex coming all the way back to the front and almost winning, if not for the crazy finish that we'll get to later. But yeah, that was very, very surprising on my end.
Yeah, it was definitely a weird race in terms of that, because it kind of threw you for a loop on who was going to be competitive, and it seemed like the Fords were going to be the strongest manufacturer this weekend after the early start of this race, with the Penske cars all looking like they had strong speed, along with Almirola. So lots of different things going on early on in terms of who was struggling and who was actually competitive. And Ryan Blaney, being one of those Penske cars, had a shifter pop out of gear coming out of turn 2.
Yeah, that was crazy.
That was a really weird sequence. You don't see that very often. I remember Dale Jr. having a couple of issues with the shifter popping out, but so he had to hold his hand on the shifter and drive one-handed just to try and keep the car in gear. And I mean, I can't imagine the fatigue that was put on Blaney throughout the entire race, having to just steer with his left arm and his right arm basically just doing nothing except just feeling vibrations. It's pretty incredible what these drivers are able to do. I mean, it's a very rare occurrence, but yeah, I mean, Blaney held on for it. It didn't seem to hinder his performance, I'd say. He was pretty strong all day long. Solid top 5 car for Blaney. So he had to actually try to figure out how to attach a bungee cord to his seat.
That was really funny.
He
when they sped it up and showed him over like 2.5 pace laps trying to do it, and then finally just throwing it to the side.
He just gave it up. Yeah. I can't blame him. I would too. I just get too frustrated. So along with Hamlin, Harvick seemed to struggle early on in this race too in stage 2. He fell back all the way back, I think, to like 21st or something like that. And he couldn't find the handling on that number 4 car. And that would obviously change a little bit later in the race, his performance, but seemed like a bit of a shaky race there for Harvick. Definitely not the dominant performance we've seen in previous weeks between the 4 and 11 cars. So we kind of predicted that a little bit. You know, I felt good about that, you know, but the JGR thing we did mess up on.
Yeah, I think most people are surprised about that because, again, if you look back to most of these races, a JGR car is right there at the front, usually with the rest of them. And this time it was only the one. And Kyle Busch, who's been the best at this track the entire time it's been on the Cup schedule, was like a bottom of the top 10 to top 15 car of the most of the day. And then the other 2 were just completely out of the picture. And so, that was very surprising. And I doubt most people expected that coming into this weekend.
Yeah, I didn't see any article or anything stay away from the Gibbs cars this weekend. So definitely threw everybody for a loop on their performance. And we move on to the end of stage 2 here. Green flag pit stops were right near the end of the stage. It was kind of an interesting pit strategy just because of the stage lengths and when a caution fell. So Brad Keselowski with the golden horseshoe.
Oh my goodness.
Good Lord. He was on pit road. He stayed out the longest out of anybody. And then the caution came out while he was on pit road. But with him staying out, a lot of the cars were a lap down. So he was able to get his full service, 4 tires and fuel, and come out as the leader. He was running, I think, back where Kyle was in about 12th to 13th before all that happened. And he ended up getting the stage win. He gets a playoff point out of basically just being lucky. So it's pretty crazy.
He's got to be the luckiest driver so far this year. It's crazy. Whether it's wins, stage points, whatever. He's had the golden horseshoe, to say the least.
He's been very lucky with that stuff. It's kind of it's a Brad Keselowski move though to go long in a pit window.
It seems like he's always the last
a strategy. He's always the last one, and I'd say about 60% of the time it works out for him, which is kind of crazy to think that nobody else really does it. So good on Brad for getting, I guess, a stage point from a car that didn't seem to have much potential. Actually stayed up in the top 5 for the rest of the race after that. So just shows you what a little bit of cleaner air and track position can do for a car basically nowadays. So Brad gets the stage win. Kyle Busch on the restart after stage 2 basically wrecks. He ends up getting into the wall. Amazing save, to be honest, but he struggled with issues in the rear end of that car all day long, and ended up finishing, I think it was 21st. So it was a rough day for Kyle Busch, especially after having the best average finish out of anybody at Kentucky. Yeah, it's just a terrible season so far for Kyle compared to what he had last season. So we have Truex now starting to enter the fold in this race with under 100 laps to go. That car was steadily moving up throughout the race. You could just see progress. It was, I think, by even the first competition caution there, he was up to, I think, 20th. I mean, he had passed Hamlin. So yeah, it was pretty crazy what that 19 car had compared to his teammates. And he ended up taking the lead with under 100 laps to go. And he seemed like he was destined for a race win just because it seemed like clean air was king. And now that the fastest car, it seemed like all day long, was actually in front, it was going to be hard to pass him. But on the final green flag stops of the day, Brendan Poole cuts down a tire. Me and Kyle were texting, oh boy, this race is going to get interesting now, because pit strategy was all up in the air. Truex had pitted, but then he would cycle out to the lead. But then a lot of cars had to take the wave around, so the restart lineup was all kind of jumbled up. So it was basically anybody's race at this point. Truex's lead had obviously evaporated.
Yeah, so everything got thrown out the window at that point.
Yeah, and Kevin Harvick ended up coming out in about third place there. It was pretty incredible what that Ford team was able to go from a 20th place car up into the top 5 that quickly, especially after those pit strategies. So then you had John Hunter Nemechek hit the wall in the ensuing restart. So there's a whole bunch of different action going on here late as compared to what happened early on in the race. It was kind of a mediocre to kind of boring race up to that point. But the last 30 laps were, pretty decent because of the restart. So credit to people, the drivers, to get those cars a little bit more interesting and get the race a bit more interesting. So Harvick would take the lead on the restart after John Hunter Nemechek wrecked, making it 3 wide on Truex and Blaney. Awesome An incredible move. Pass. Unbelievable pass. Yeah, it was beautiful. Well executed. Got the shove right from behind. I think it was from Brad. I'm not 100% sure, but it might have. It might have been Brad, right. But Harvick got the run and he takes the lead, and that was about with 20 to go, I'd say 15 to go, and it seemed like the 4 car was going to steal one here. It was because it was just so superior to be in the lead of the race. It's crazy how much you can just kind of block air, and it's a kind of a one groove racetrack too, even with the PJ1 traction compound that they have on the track. So it's, Kentucky's not the greatest track in terms of racing, and Harvick was able to execute flawlessly there, but that would kind of all be for naught, because even though Truex was catching him, it was so close, but the caution came out, and Truex did not quite get past Harvick. Harvick kept the lead, but there was a caution coming out. I think it was for Matt Kenseth getting spun by Ryan Newman. It was kind of a weird incident there. Yeah, Kenseth struggled all day long. Yeah, so that was rough for Kenseth. So then we have a restart with 2 laps to go. Now this is where the race gets very interesting. Oh boy. Kind of threw us all for a big loop here. So we've got Harvick in the lead, Truex second. Then you've got Blaney in third, Keselowski fourth, Kurt Busch 5th, and Cole Custer in 6th. And we're mentioning Cole Custer's name for an obvious reason, which we will get to. So
hey, let's not forget De Benedetto behind him, because if it's not for De Benedetto there in 8th, I don't think Custer's up there for the lead.
Basically, that's true. Every single driver in the top 10 kind of played a role into that, into the outcome of this race, which is kind of crazy to think on a track.
Not too often you see that,
No, you don't see that too often. And it was pretty entertaining there, those last 2 laps. I'd say Kentucky obviously has a thing for wild finishes the last couple of seasons. So it was pretty interesting there at the end. So we had Harvick kind of get a decent lead there a little bit. Truex kind of side by side. They side drafted each other. Harvick seemed to clear Truex on the outside, and then Truex gets into the left rear quarter panel of Harvick. Like, I don't know if the broadcast really mentioned that enough, how key of a move that was, because with that contact, Harvick kind of loses control, spins down to, doesn't spin, but kind of has to turn left and really have to control the car aggressively, and goes down to the inside, giving Truex the preferred outside line on going into turn 3. And then they go side by side through turn 3 and 4. And then we've got Ryan Blaney in third coming up, goes down the inside of Kevin Harvick because they're side drafting each other, Truex and Harvick, slowing them both down. And here comes Cole Custer on the outside after a huge push from De Benedetto on the restart. He's in fourth, and he goes 4 wide at the start-finish line. What a finish that would have been if that was the actual finish of the race. But we take the white flag. Custer with the momentum on the outside. Truex cannot block that. It was an incredible run for Custer. Blaney hits the apron, hits a bump down there, shunts into Harvick.
Gets some air,
and then it kind of hits Truex a little bit, slowing those two down. And Custer's just free on the outside.
He goes around the
like
outside.
a bat out of hell.
Yeah.
And he goes around the outside, and he does not look back. Truex comes ahead of Harvick in second, but Cole Custer wins. The rookie wins at Kentucky, his first career win. Huge playoff implications. Did not see that one coming at all. He won it in the Xfinity Series at Kentucky last year, but, I mean, for a rookie to win in the Cup Series is almost unheard of. The last time it happened where it wasn't rain short, it was back in 2007. Do you know who it was, Kyle?
2000. I don't know.
Juan Pablo Montoya.
Juan Pablo. Wow.
At Sonoma. It's been that long since a rookie won in the Cup Series. That was in his first season, and it wasn't rain short.
Full time and not weather shortened. Yeah. Shout out Chris Buescher.
Incredible win for Cole Custer. So happy for him. We were almost right with our Truex pick last week. So close.
I wish I listened to myself when I was talking about if you want to go a bit more conservative and go with a couple underdogs in there. And I mentioned the two rookies, Bell and Custer. I should have put them in.
I know. It was just a crapshoot there at the end.
Oh, my goodness.
I mean, I was so happy for Custer. I mean, I was on the edge of my seat those last 2 laps. Gave us some very entertaining racing there. I can't believe that he's in the playoffs and in the All-Star race now. That locks him into the All-Star race. Another person in there. He doesn't have to go into the Open. So great win for that 41 team. He was 25th in points going into this race. It's crazy to think how much of a shift this is going to do for the playoffs. He may not perform in the playoffs, but that takes away a spot that would maybe be secured for somebody else. And with that win, it bumps the playoff line up. So Jimmy Johnson is on the cutoff line. He's still in the playoffs after missing 1 race, which is pretty impressive. And now he's ahead by a decent margin, about 20, 25 points ahead of Austin Dillon and Tyler Reddick and Eric Jones. Eric Jones needs to turn his season around really quickly here because, I mean, he can't just skate in. He's going to have to maybe, get some really solid finishes here, top 10 on a regular basis. He can't have another race like he did today. And the rest of the races, maybe they're not his strong suit either. So this could be a bit of a tough road for Eric Jones for a Gibbs car that may not make the playoffs, which would really, really hurt his chances at maybe even securing a ride for next year at JGR with Bell, seeming like he's, turning his season around at Levine Family Racing. So what are your thoughts on the whole win here, Kyle? I mean, this was a huge upset win at Kentucky.
Well, this win is kind of why NASCAR has the format that they do, because a team that has such a terrible start like Cole Custer but does have speed has started to figure it out as these weeks have gone on. And we've seen it these last 2-3 weeks that they've had legitimate speed in comparison to what they had, especially early in the year, where it looked like they were one of the backmarker cars. But they've really figured it out with Cole Custer's driving style, and that's why they have this format, because it looked like they were basically completely out of the playoff picture. But now they have a massive weekend, they get a win, and now they're locked in. And so it goes from being a disappointing season from Cole Custer to all of a sudden being one of the best rookie seasons we've seen so far, because he's in the playoffs, and we haven't seen a rookie make the playoffs in a handful of years. So, for Cole Custer, an absolutely massive weekend. And I think it shows that the speed that we saw at Indianapolis isn't just a fluke, that these guys are really starting to figure out this car, really starting to figure it out with Cole Custer. And given what we've seen from obviously Kevin Harvick, but more importantly, Eric Almirola and the transition he's had into one of the top-end cars in the field, I think that we could see some more surprising results from Cole Custer going forward if they can keep up this momentum.
Yeah, SHR, the entire organization, we mentioned previously on this show that it seemed like Harvick it's a one-man show, but in previous weeks here, it seems like it's not that case anymore. It's becoming more of a whole organization and a team effort here. Custer getting the win. Eric Almirola still hasn't quite gotten that win yet, but he's had a lot of speed lately, and Clint Boyer, he's been solid. He hasn't had that speed. He hasn't been at the front leading laps like his teammates. But, he hasn't done a bad job. I don't think Boyer's done too poorly in that car. Just compared to his teammates, it's kind of hard to live up to those expectations a little bit. So, and some notable finishers from this race. I mean, obviously Custer in first. That's probably your most notable finisher. Matt DiBenedetto finishes third in the Quaker State
Huge
car.
Run. Yeah.
So for the sponsored race, did a wonderful job in that 21 car. I think, definitely proving that 21 car is capable of playoff. Just shows you what Paul Menard was not able to do last year and what DiBenedetto can do this year. And you've got Christopher Bell in seventh, the rookie, another one. And all three of the main rookies, the big three from the Xfinity Series, finished in the top 10.
Had finished in the top 15 the entire time they've run in the Cup Series at Kentucky. Just incredible stuff from this crop.
Yeah, and then Reddick in 10th. So it's, a great rookie battle. I mean, I hate that they're all competing against each other in a way because I feel like they all deserve Rookie of the Year in some respects. But they're doing a marvelous job and making sure that equipment that may not have been so great in the past is more in contention for solid finishes. And I feel, you got to think a little bit back here too. That's Daniel Suarez's car last season, and Suarez didn't even make the playoffs. It's a big move that Custer was able to get a win and make the playoffs here. That can't be overstated enough. And Suarez has done a good job in that 96 car. He's gone kind of under the radar. No one really mentions it because it is a back marker team, but in the equipment that he is having, he's doing a decent job. So Kyle Busch in 21st, that's obviously a notable thing on one of his best tracks. Eric Jones, 22nd, nothing from Eric Jones all day long.
Nothing.
Didn't even really crack the top 10. He got one stage point in stage one, and that's it. Really disappointing day for Eric Jones, especially after having never finished outside the top 7 here in the three previous starts. And Chase Elliott back in 23rd. I don't know what the heck happened to that 9 car. I don't really know how he finished back there, to be honest. Rough couple of weekends for Chase Elliott here too, after having such a really strong run there. Seemed like he was a championship favorite there around that Charlotte area, where in Darlington, really right off of the pandemic break. He's kind of struggled here the past couple of weeks at Pocono, Indy, and at Kentucky here. So I'd be surprised if that 9 car doesn't turn it around eventually here. Just a couple of rough patches here for the 9. That's all I've got really for notable finishers. The rest of them are pretty straightforward in terms of, not really too many surprises. But those 3 big names in the 20s is pretty disappointing for all 3 of them. So with that, I mean, that's kind of the Kentucky race review. I mean, there wasn't too much going on until those final 20 laps. It didn't get exciting
until the last 20, 30.
Yeah, so it's a great win for Custer. I couldn't be happy for the guy.
Huge win.
It's going to be the biggest win of the season.
It wasn't even that much of a fluke because he had speed all day long. He was up and contending. I believe he got stage points in either, I believe it was both stages, if I remember.
He finished third in stage 2.
Exactly. So he had legitimate speed all day long. This isn't a super fluky win where it was some strategy. He had a restart after going from 20th to 3rd and gets the win. No, this was a legitimate win for this team, and that's huge for that for both Cole Custer and that team because, as we've mentioned, I mean, back in 25th, had struggled all year long to find something that works for Cole Custer, but these last couple weeks, they've really nailed it, and they've been in contention and obviously getting the win this past week. And, jumping from not just getting the win, but jumping from 25th in points all the way up for a tie for 20th, up 5 positions in that one race. That just goes to show, 1, how tight that mid-pack battle is, and 2, how big of a weekend Cole Custer had.
Yeah, it's unbelievable that a rookie won. I can't believe
it.
That 2007 was the last time that we've seen something like this, and I think that just shows you how impressive this rookie crop is. That it has been this long. I mean, you've had some really big names since then that have been rookies. Chase Elliott, he never won in his rookie season. William Byron, terrible rookie season after winning the Xfinity Championship.
Still doesn't have a win.
No, he still doesn't have a win. It's crazy this is a huge win for not just Cole Custer, but for the sport. I mean, it's crazy. It's like, I don't have words to really describe like how big of how big this is for the entire sport. So good for Custer. He's in the All-Star race. He deserves it after that performance.
Absolutely.
So we'll get to the All-Star race preview, but with that, I think we kind of move on to Cush's threes here. Kyle, take it away.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's pretty obvious who one of them is, so I'm going to push Cole Custer to the side because we've given him a lot of praise already, and I feel like he's the obvious one everyone knows about. So Cole Custer gets the win, a huge performance. He's excluded from Cush's threes because if it were Cush's threes, he'd be all three of them. So moving ahead, number one, we've got Matt DiBenedetto, and it's because of just how incredible his last 20 laps were. On that second to last restart, he was all the way back in 20th, and he got all the way up to the top 10 by the last restart, which set up Cole Custer being able to win the race because he got a massive push from Matt DiBenedetto, an awesome restart, and DiBenedetto was able to follow him on that outside and pick up that third position. So an awesome day for DiBenedetto, picked up some key stage points as well, and after a bit of a shaky start or restart to the season, DiBenedetto's really positioned himself to be really locked into that playoff position there. He's in 12th right now, obviously. With the win for Cole Custer, it's more like the top 15 make the playoffs now. So a little bit less of a buffer than he would have normally had if Cole Custer hadn't won the race, but he's still got a 50, 60, I think almost 70-point gap to Austin Dillon there.
Good
so
gap.
That's a pretty good gap. And for Matt DiBenedetto, especially there were a couple races since this restart where it was kind of looking like he was edging closer and closer to that cutoff line. A big performance this weekend has really helped push him back and solidify that position in the top 12. Number two, Christopher Bell. All the talk has gone to Cole Custer for winning, and rightfully so, but Christopher Bell, once again, showing consistent speed, and we know how good he is on the long runs, but he showed at this race and with those two last restarts that he was able to hold his own on the restarts as well, and that's going to be key going forward if they're going to make up the lost time that they have back in 23rd in points, or even go out and win a race and join Cole Custer in the playoffs, which they very much can do. Like, let's not forget, it was the second half of the season. It was the Bristol Night race that it was Matt DiBenedetto that almost won for Levi Family Racing. We've talked about it a handful of times. They're a second half of the season team, and we're seeing it with these last few results for Christopher Bell. Another solid top 10, and at a track where it was widely talked about how rookies had been terrible here, and how this rookie crop would kind of stack up against those. They hit it with smashing success because Tyler Reddick had a pretty solid finish as well. But Christopher Bell there in 7th, I believe it is, a big day for him. And finally, for the positive threes, Eric Almirola. We were talking last week about how this has been a terrible track for him. I believe he had one top 10 finish in the last 7 races or something like that since they've been here at Kentucky. And he went out, led the most laps, won a stage. Even when they got back in dirty air through some strategy and whatnot, he was still able to come home in 8th place, finish with a top 10 finish, and have one of the biggest points hauls, again, of the day like we saw at Pocono. So it's just been incredible to see this turnaround of this team, because for most of the season they were running around 12th, 13th in points, but these last few weeks have catapulted them up into the top 8. With this performance this week, he passed Alex Bowman in points, which is incredible to think, because at the beginning of this year, it was looking like Alex Bowman could potentially be one of the championship contenders. But he's fallen off, and Almirola has just soared since then. So those are my 3 positive ones, and the 3 negative threes are pretty straightforward because it's basically Joe Gibbs Racing outside of Martin Truex Jr. Kyle Busch, Eric Jones, Denny Hamlin just didn't have what we were expecting from them this weekend at a track that Joe Gibbs has been so good at. It was only Christopher Bell with the Toyota equipment and Martin Truex Jr. out of Joe Gibbs itself that were really good this weekend, and that's very disappointing for them. Not necessarily for Denny Hamlin because he's been so good. He has the wins stacked up, all that kind of stuff, but for Eric Jones at a track he's been so good at, falling back in points, having Tyler Reddick jump him, falling back to 18th now, with somebody behind him winning and jumping and pushing that cutoff line even further away from him, that's huge, and that's going to further impact these contract negotiations. And if he even returns to that 20, because it seems race by race, the likelihood of that continues to get lower and lower. And for Kyle Busch, it's really seemed like this weekend was shaping up to be a weekend that he would be able to turn kind of his fortunes around, maybe finish in the top 5, get a really good points haul, get that positive momentum going again. But it was another extremely, extremely disappointing week for him. And I don't know what to say at this point. I'm sure you're in the same boat. I mean, like, it seems like every time we go to a track that Kyle Busch has like some of the best stats that we're like, okay, maybe this is the week he turns it around, and he has more issues. And it was the same thing this time around at Kentucky. And I just don't really know when they're going to turn it around. Maybe it is until that practice returns that they'll finally turn it around. But man, another tough week, and he falls back to 11th in points. Kurt Busch passes him with his big performance that we kind of expected from him this weekend. But we expected that big performance from Kurt Busch because of last year's performance. And with him at that performance was Kyle Busch, and he was nowhere to be found. So another really disappointing weekend for Kyle Busch and Joe Gibbs in general. Obviously, having Martin Truex being able to come through the field is positive for them, but I'm sure they're very disappointed with the rest of the cars this weekend.
Yeah, Kyle didn't get any stage points either, which really drove me nuts too. I think if you start on pole position and you don't get stage points in that first stage, maybe, you have a little bit of pit strategy there. If there's a caution at the end of the stage, you want to kind of set yourself up for the next stage. But the fact that you don't even get stage points and there was nothing going on in that first stage is that's ridiculous.
Unbelievable.
It's unacceptable. It's ridiculous. I'm beyond upset that this season has gone the way it is. It's just very frustrating. I can't imagine how he feels. It's got to be even worse for him. It's just disappointing. He's just had no luck, no speed, no nothing. That's what I tweeted out. He has had nothing. It's just been absolutely devastating to see a cup champion, the defending cup champion, perform like this. It's not good for the sport, and it's not good for him, and it's not good for his fans. I'm going to be selfish and say that. It's not good.
Hey, it's all good. It's all good. Let it out.
But the last 2 weekends, the last 3 weekends, you'd think these are the tracks that he's going to turn it on. Pocono, Indianapolis, and Kentucky. These are his 3 tracks. You're not looking at Michigan to turn it around. You're not looking at Dover for him to turn it around. I don't know what the heck they're thinking. They're not going to perform on his worst tracks. These were the tracks he has to make up points and get a playoff point. He has no playoff points.
That's insane.
We are getting close to the playoffs here. If he goes in there he's not even going to get one bonus point for the points. He's not in the top 10 in points. He's not even going to get one for that. If he goes in there with no bonus points, he's going to be maybe out in the first round. It's going to be insane. But saying that first round is very strong statistically for that 18 team. He's got Darlington, Bristol, and Richmond. And if they are having practices there, I'd imagine that 18 team to maybe win 2 of those races. You have to expect that. So it's going to be very interesting going down to the playoffs. He will not fall out of the playoffs. He's not running poorly. No. But, considering where he is, he's like over 100 points back of Harvick. But he's about 80 points behind Hamlin, which isn't actually as bad as I would have thought it would be, considering Hamlin has 4 wins. So, I think this has got to be probably one of the most disappointing weekends of Kyle Busch this season so far, considering his success at Kentucky. So with that, I'm kind of done with talking about Kyle for Kentucky.
Yeah. I want to give one more shout out for Kentucky.
Go for
Ty
it.
Dillon.
I was going to mention Ty Dillon.
20-plus points, finishes 16th. I believe it's the first time this season that they've had back-to-back 20-plus point hauls. They've had a really tough time keeping up with the advanced midfield with front row and RPM both having really, really successful seasons so far this year. They haven't quite been able to keep up, and that's a little bit disappointing because last year they were up and competing with Austin Dillon in points for much of the season. And this year they've kind of fallen back from the rest of them, but a couple positive performances these last couple weeks from Ty Dillon. So a little shout out to the Little Germain Racing team.
Yeah, he usually is ahead of those RPM and front row motorsports cars last season. But like you mentioned, the midfield battle has become even more tight, and it's become even more competitive. So it's been tough for them to stay afloat in that battle. But good to see Ty Dillon capitalizing on other people's misfortunes and just getting a solid top 20 finish. So now we kind of move on to the Xfinity and Truck Series just really quickly.
Yeah, just quickly.
There's a doubleheader with the Xfinity Series at Kentucky, 2 races on the Thursday and Friday. Austin Cindric won both of them. Not too much else happened in those races, to be honest. Cindric, gets his first and second career oval wins, which is huge for him.
He's been so close so many times. It's good to see him finally break through and get that one. Considering
the drivers in the Xfinity Series this season, you'd think that he would eventually get that oval win. So that 22 car is usually really strong there at Kentucky in the Xfinity Series as well. I remember when Brad used to race that consistently, he'd always be kind of the class of the field there as well. So good on Cindric. He gets 2 wins, his first 2 wins of the season as well, getting some more playoff points for him. He's going to be a name in the playoff, championship hunt as well. So good for him. And then in the second race, Noah Gragson and Harrison Burton made contact on the final race start. I was out that day, so I didn't get to watch the Xfinity race, but then my mom's like, NASCAR's kind of blowing up on Twitter. And I'm like, what do you mean? It's the Xfinity race. It can't blow up on Twitter. But I didn't really know. And I watched the race, and Gragson and Burton got into a fight afterwards.
Finally, we've been waiting so long since the restart to finally see something. And sure enough, it's Gragson and Burton.
2 former KBM teammates.
Gragson, I kind of expect. But Burton, bit of a surprising one.
Yeah, he's got a little bit of his dad in him, I guess. With the Jeff Gordon and Jeff Burton kind of
a lot.
Yeah. So it was actually a legitimate fight. Gragson
couple haymakers,
couple of punches thrown there. So we got some good old MMA action in NASCAR. So you can't really go wrong with that, as long as it's not another John West Townley fight brawl where they just kind of go down on the track, just kind of bear hug each other. So that's kind of notable, I guess. I don't know what kind of repercussions it will take for the next week's race. I would be surprised
if there wasn't anything relatively significant, just because of all the COVID protocols and whatnot. And Gragson wasn't wearing a mask, and I'm sure having 2 people fighting isn't a great look when you're supposed to be doing all the social distancing and whatnot. So I would expect something fairly significant. I don't know what significant necessarily means in this case, but especially given, I don't know if it was that earlier that day or if it was the previous day, I can't remember. NASCAR sent out a memo reminding teams that, hey, all it takes is one outbreak to kind of screw this all up. So we're seeing more and more people show up to the track, more and more people not wearing masks and whatnot. So just sending out that reminder, and then either that night or the next day, multiple people not wearing masks and fighting. So it was definitely spiced up what was a pretty lackluster Kentucky weekend, to say the least.
Yeah, with all the on-track racing there at Kentucky, it was kind of lackluster. I mean, except for the Cup finish, to be honest. So, and then Sheldon Creed gets his first career Truck Series win as well.
Which is surprising. I didn't realize he hadn't won a race yet, because he's been so competitive for so long. But yeah, Sheldon Creed getting that first win, great to see for him, even though it does come in the rain shortened one. But he probably deserved to win. At Pocono, just barely got beat by Brandon Jones in the closing laps there. But great to see him finally pick up that first win. And he's really looking like he's going to be a contender for the Truck Series Championship this year. I believe he's up in second in the regular season standings there. Behind Austin Hill there. And given how much the veterans have struggled in that series so far this year, it's looking like we're going to have a fairly young championship fight here this year.
Yeah, and there's so many competitive trucks in that Truck Series that, you've got some bigger names outside the top 10 there that are going to make the playoffs. So it's going to be very interesting to watch that battle. It obviously doesn't get the amount of attention that the others two series do, so that's kind of unfortunate.
Two of the championship 4 from last season are on the outside looking in Matt Crafton and Stuart Friesen this year, and that's with 2 more trucks being added to the playoffs this year, as well as they've gone from 8 to 10 this year, given that they expanded a couple more competitive trucks with Derek Krause and Todd Gilliland getting his own team there. Truck Series is definitely overlooked because it's just been so close, and the racing this year has been really good as well. So, unfortunate it was rain shortened there, but big day for Sheldon Creed.
Yeah, both of those series will be moving on to Texas next week. We'll have a race preview for that on Thursday. We'll have a special show for our next topic here. The All-Star race is coming up on Thursday here with the Open. I think it's 4 Eastern. It might be. I'm not sure. I'll just check the time on that because I feel like one's a bit early for us on the West Coast. But
let's see here. All-Star Open. At 7 p.m. for us. So it's a later start. So 7 p.m. Open, and then 8:30 All-Star race. So and that's what it's shaping up.
So
once a little bit later than usual. I feel like it feels like it was like a 6 and an 8 start previous, but it seems like they're really tightening it up and going 7 and then basically a half hour right into the All-Star
there's no real break there because it'll be interesting to see how they handle the All-Star race.
I'm excited.
Driver intros and stuff.
Yeah.
But so what's new this weekend? We've got a couple of new things this weekend to keep your eye on. Bristol is actually the host of the All-Star race for the first time.
That's going to be fun.
And it's something every fan has been waiting for so long. It's the perfect opportunity to try it this season.
We're going to get I hope it's 4 different bump and runs, and it's going to be awesome.
This is no points. Remember this for any new fans out there. There's no points on the line this week. It's just either win the $1 million or come back on the wrecker. So it's basically that. These cars don't really matter. New paint schemes with the numbers being moved back. They've released the paint schemes. We'll talk about that in a second. It's for more advertising space for the sponsors is what they're trying to get at. Okay, and we've got the choose cone rule in effect this weekend, trying it out on a first-time basis. I'm really excited to see how this thing works. Bristol is the perfect track to try it on because the outside line is so superior on restarts. I don't think it's for the initial start. They haven't really confirmed that or not, but I
have no clue.
I don't think they should do it for the initial start, to be honest. I think it's just
earn the position that you've got.
Yeah. So essentially what that is the drivers get to pick which lane they want to restart on. So there's going to be probably some disparity in terms of what the length of the lines each are because there is no rule on that. They can just pick whichever lane they want. I imagine most drivers are going to pick the outside. But depending on what track position you're in, what position you're in, if you're in second, you're probably going to take the outside line. But if you're back, 7th and the inside line maybe has one car in it, you take the inside because probably it's going to be a neck game, right? It's going to be a whole bunch of games. It could decide the All-Star race, to be honest, and how you
it's going to be fun. I can't wait.
I'm really excited to see how that works out. And then we've got Underglow will be featured underneath the cars, the cars that are locked in. I am super excited to see these
random.
Things
wasn't expecting that, but I'm super here for it.
It kind of really started last season when in the championship kind of weekend there in Nashville when Kurt Busch put Underglow underneath his car, and it looks super cool under the lights. So I can't imagine what it's going to look like at Bristol. I hope Lionel with the diecast comes out with one of these with some neon lights underneath. I'm definitely purchasing that if they make that. But I'm really excited to see how those cars look. It's a whole new look for these cars, both with the paint scheme and underneath the cars with the underglow. So, and we've also got fans back at the track this week. There's expected to be 50,000 fans back in attendance, the most for any sport since the pandemic, which would be a huge step for NASCAR. Bristol has the capacity to hold them probably safely as well, just because of the amount of seating capacity that they have. So I'm really excited to see some fans back in the stands and hear probably the roar of the crowd. So This is going to be a terrific Thursday night. I don't care if you are not a fan or you are a fan. You have to watch this race because it's going to be very, very fun. Bristol's always exciting, even if it's regular season. We've talked about this in our Q&A video a week or so ago, that it is the best track on the NASCAR calendar, and what a way to bring in the All-Star race with the best track in NASCAR. So really, really excited. We've got Truex on pole. They had the draw yesterday. Justin Haley starts fourth for Spire Motorsports.
I didn't even realize that they were actually going to do that. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's going to be really, really fun. And then you've got 4 drivers coming in from the Open, which is the preliminary race. 1 fan vote, which will be Bubba Wallace, 100%. It's not even a question.
He goes out and wins a stage or wins the race.
That is very true. I think Bubba Wallace will be in the All-Star race no matter what. I'll say that. He definitely has a shot to win a stage, but I'm sure he would enjoy that more. But the fan vote doesn't hurt too much either. And McDowell is on the pole for the Open. So with that, Kyle, I think we can kind of get into a couple of predictions here. First off, who are the 4 drivers you have going into the All-Star race?
Okay. Well, I don't want to go too basic with this, so I'm going to spice it up a little bit, okay? So I do believe, as everyone expects, Bubba Wallace will win the fan vote. But you know what? I think he's going to go out, and Bristol is one of his better tracks. We saw him last time the All-Star race or the All-Star Open happened. He ran his ass off to go out and make it into the race, and at a track that he's definitely very good at. I think Bubba Wallace is going to go out and win one of these stages or win the race. So I've got Bubba Wallace making it in through the race itself. I've also got Matt DiBenedetto going out and winning himself into the race. And I'll also say Christopher Bell gets in.
Man.
That way. And finally, the fan vote, I'll say that it's Clint Boyer that gets in through the fan vote, just through the barstool bump and whatnot that he has there. But those are the 4 that I've got making it in. Bubba Wallace, Matt DiBenedetto, Christopher Bell, and Clint Boyer. What do you got?
I've got 3 of those 4. I've got Bubba, DiBenedetto, and Bell. And then I had Almirola. I think he's just been on such a roll. I don't know. He's not just statistically been the best at Bristol, but I mean, considering who he's against, he's got the track position there in the first stage. He's starting second. I could see him winning the first one and kind of just locking himself in. That being said, William Byron might be someone to keep your eye on. I mean, it's just going to be very difficult, I think, for him considering who he's up against. I mean, I know he won the iRacing event there at Bristol, but it's going to be, I think it's going to be a little bit of a tougher road for Byron. I would have probably had him in if it was Charlotte, but Bristol, I'm not 100% confident. So I'd say those 4. I think either one of our 4 could.
And all of that to be said, who knows? Because it's Bristol.
Exactly.
And if you've got second place, and let's say you're like a Michael McDowell or something, and you don't really get this opportunity to be in the All-Star race, and you're running in second going into turn 3 on the last lap, I feel like there's going to be a little bit of contact made to try and get yourself in. So that's what's great about it, because it's not like Charlotte, even though we've seen some awesome Open finishes at Charlotte. It's even more wide open because even some of the more quote-unquote mid-pack cars have an even better shot. Because you don't have to necessarily worry about that high-end engine power like you would at something like a Charlotte. So it's going to be awesome to see. I can't wait because you already know that we're going to see 3 or 4 bump and runs. I would imagine there's going to be a lot of people angry at each other. And, the Open itself is going to be nuts, and I can only imagine what it's going to be like into the race with $1 million on the line.
Yeah, I'm super excited. I mean, it's going to be the best Thursday night I've had in a long time. I'll say that. So it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. And our predictions are just predictions. They're probably going to be wrong. But that's what we love about the sport, that you can, it's not predictable. So who is your All-Star race winner pick? Now that we're moving on from the Open, who's the big winner? Who taking home the $1 million?
Who's taking home the $1 million? I'm going to say that Chase Elliott gets a little bit of redemption after his blunder at Bristol earlier, causing a bit of a kerfuffle with Joey Logano, to say the least. I think he gets some redemption at this track and goes out and wins the $1 million.
I'm going Kyle Busch.
Okay.
I think this is it. This is the track. This is going to be it. This is his best track.
He finally does it.
$1 million on the line. You can't get any more high stakes than that. He's aggressive. He will put the bumper to somebody, no doubt. I'm sure he'll
probably do it to multiple people.
I think a couple of enemies may come out of this race for Kyle, but he is determined, I'd say. I think he's got a great shot at it, just because it is Bristol. But I'm going with Kyle this week. I have to. I just need to put those positive vibes out into the universe.
I thought about it, but I couldn't just go out and do it. I've bet on him a couple times since the restart, and I can't do it again. But it's all good. Yeah,
I'm putting those positive vibes out in the universe. Hopefully they work. I'll say that. So it's gonna be awesome. Can't wait for the All-Star race. It's been something that we've
much fun.
been looking forward to since they've announced it was at Bristol. So. With that, we'll bring you a race recap, hopefully on the Friday there after the race, kind of get you caught up on any news that happens throughout the week after the All-Star race, and we'll give you a Texas preview for the Cup Series there as well. So with that, we can kind of move on to some other news that kind of came out over the past weekend. Tony Stewart and Ray Evernham are starting a new racing series called Superstar Racing Experience with big names like Jeff Gordon, Dale Jr., Jamie Johnson and Paul Tracy, all rumored to be interested in participating. These series the series has identified Nashville Fairgrounds, a track that NASCAR has been really trying to look to get onto their schedule. Eldora and Knoxville as potential venues for the series to take place in.
Yes.
Stewart says this series is meant to be an additive new take on motorsports. And I don't know where this came from, but I kind of like it. I'm interested to see. I mean, that's all the news that we have. This is all reported by Adam Stern. I don't really have anything else in terms of breaking news on that, but it was just an interesting story that came out that a new racing series is up and going to be on the go. Don't know when. Don't know what the cars are going to look like. Don't know anything other than what I've just mentioned there. So I'm excited. I don't know. There's not much else to say. Tony Stewart and Ray Evernham are not a bad combination to start a racing series.
You could do a lot worse. Yeah.
So with that, that's kind of all the news we have. I mean, if you got big names like Jeff Gordon, Dale Jr.
Yeah, and on Twitter alone, Tony Kanaan and Greg Biffle both were like, hey, I want to do this. Like, sign me up. And I mean, it seems like there's going to be some big names involved. Kind of similar to like an IROC kind of vibe that they've got going on, fixed setups, just kind of go out, run the race, that kind of thing. I think it's going to be fun. Based off of what I've read, it sounds like next summer CBS kind of thing. We won't know anything as to what it's going to look like or be like until they actually get on the track and start running. Because there's been talk of Eldora dirt tracks, short tracks, road courses, modified ovals. Like everything is on the table for this. And given it's likely to be kind of exhibition like, just kind of show up for the races you want to run and run those, I think is going to be awesome. Because when you have Tony Stewart, Ray Evernham already attached to it, and when you've got rumored like Jeff Gordon, Dale Jr., all these different guys, I'm excited. I'll be honest. I think it's going to be a ton of fun.
Yeah, I think, with the tracks that are being rumored, I think it's a total mix of everything. It's going to be like almost like a mix of all kinds of different motorsports, kind of, there's a lot of variety. Definitely going to be interesting to see how that story unfolds over the next year or so as more stuff gets released. And hopefully we get, it seems like they're going mainly after retired people. It seems like it's kind of people outside the Cup Series that are going to be kind of invested in this. So, which is not a bad thing. I think the retired people are going to be awesome to watch if they are interested in doing it. So it's going to be great. I'm really excited to see how Tony Stewart and Ray Evernham create this series and how it's broadcasted and everything like that. So if it's on mainstream and it's not like through a streaming service or on YouTube or something like that, if it's on a national network, I can only do wonders for it. So looking forward to seeing that. And before the show today, there will be fans for the Daytona Road Course and the Coke Zero 400 at Daytona, the regular season finale. They confirmed that this morning, so tickets are on sale for that. So yeah, that's basically the news that's happened over the past week with NASCAR related stuff. We've got the All-Star race obviously this week. And with that kind of wraps up our NASCAR segment. We won't do a fantasy special for this.
Yeah, we'll save that
this episode.
Once we get
we'll do
closer,
that for Friday. We'll get that closer to the Texas weekend. So, I mean, you go from 1.5 miles to the next one. That's kind of subpar. So
at least we got Bristol in between.
It is what it is. So we kind of move on to Formula One, I guess. Now we shift to a different part of the world here. We're in Austria for the second week in a row, but it's called the Styrian Grand Prix. Not Formula One didn't really know which hashtag to use. They use Austrian GP, Styrian GP. I don't know. Whichever one you want to call it, Austrian GP2. You know, maybe that doesn't actually make sense. GP2 does not work. So Styrian GP we'll call it. And we'll start with qualifying. Probably the worst conditions I've ever seen for qualifying.
What a qualifying session. I got to say, I woke up for it, and I'm glad I did because that's one of the most entertaining qualifying sessions I've ever watched.
I would have felt bad for you if they canceled qualifying and you got up to watch it.
Oh, no. I had the alarm set. Like, if it was canceled, wake up for like a minute and a half, see it's canceled, and go right back to sleep. But,
it was pouring rain.
I was very happy.
Pouring rain.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible. Yeah, the amount of rain was really astonishing. Like,
do you think it was probably equal to Monza a couple of years ago, around that kind of, because they had a delay there too. I think it's probably pretty similar conditions with that. And I mean, they were treacherous. Not as many drivers went off as I thought they were going to be, to be honest. I thought the drivers played it pretty calm there. It was going into the Saturday. It seemed like FP2 times would be the actual starting grid, which would mean Verstappen was on pole, because FP3 was actually canceled due to rain, but they ended up getting qualifying going, and Perez is knocked out in Q1, which was pretty substantial after his Friday speed, because that Racing Point arguably was the second fastest car this weekend. It was right there with the Red Bull, I'd say. Verstappen definitely led the charge in that camp this week, and Perez with Racing Point as well. So I'd say those two cars are pretty equal this week, which is a massive step for Racing Point. They showed their speed in the race. Perez did. He came up through the entire field, which we'll get to. So Perez knocked out in Q1, which was very, very surprising. Leclerc knocked out in Q2. He finishes 11th. Second week in a row, Ferrari does not make Q3. A rough start to the season for Ferrari, not just in qualifying, but also in the race, which we'll get to.
Man, George Russell almost beat him on pace.
I know. George Russell qualified P12, the guy in the Williams. Massive pace out of that thing. That's driver ability right there.
It is.
Not even close. Latifi was knocked out in Q1. Russell was like within a tenth of going to Q3. So can you imagine the scenes if a Williams got into Q3? But that kid's got something special. He's going to be a force to be reckoned with for many years. So once he gets in the right equipment, I'll say that. And
it seems like one more year and then we'll really see him shine.
Yeah, and then we've got Hamilton putting in an astonishing lap in Q3. He gets the pole over Verstappen by, wait for it, 1.2 seconds.
1.2. 1.2.
First to second is very, very big gap. It's almost unheard of. It's insane. Basically unheard of instead of in these conditions. I think it's the biggest first to second margin I've ever seen while I've been watching the sport. It's crazy. Hamilton, well-deserved. The Mercedes was the superior car this weekend. Hamilton obviously figured it out from the week prior, what he was missing in the car, and he was basically dominant the whole weekend. So Sainz gets third for McLaren, some notable Q qualifiers. Ocon P5 for Renault, great qualifying effort for him. And Gasly 8th for AlphaTauri. Great weekend for those guys in terms of qualifying. The race didn't go to plan for some of them as much, but the qualifying speed was there and the drivability was there for these guys. And I mean, the conditions didn't get any better throughout the entire qualifying session. They were on the wets the whole time. They're lucky that they got it in, and we're thankful that they got it in because it gave us a very interesting qualifying session, because qualifying is always better in the rain, to be honest. So Norris and Leclerc get a 3-place grid penalty each. Norris for passing under yellows in practice, and Leclerc for blocking Danny Kvyat in qualifying. So that's the notable stuff from qualifying. We move on to the race now. Hamilton gets away at the start, and that's about it. For him, anyways. On the opening lap, though, going into turn 3, the 2 Ferraris make contact. Leclerc, starting behind Vettel, trying to be over-aggressive, sends a dive bomb to a gap that is not there on Sebastian Vettel, and runs right into the top. Kind of skips over him. It's a weird kind of crash. Takes out the rear wing of Vettel. It's basically just dangling there. Both cars would have to retire within the first 3 laps. Yeah, that's a rough start for Ferrari. This season has not gone to plan for Vettel, especially. Leclerc gets the P2 last weekend, out this week. So I don't know. I don't know how it can go so bad from one season to the next for Ferrari. Their last car last season was faster, which is kind of crazy that they've taken such a huge step backwards. I don't know how you honestly do that, but they have. And they were both out. The safety car would be deployed. That's kind of all that happened there for about the first 3 laps there. Yeah. And it was a big chunk there where it was, you had a couple of passes here and there, or not to say that it was very boring, but not what we saw the previous week in terms of action. And
which was kind of
make a mistake. That's true. You can't really have 2 bangers at the same racetrack, especially. They've learned from their mistakes, kind of thing. And the reliability is a little bit better this week. We didn't have 9 retirements this week, I'll say that. So Russell made a mistake there, kind of got into the gravel. I think it's in turn 6. Just a mistake by him. He owned up to it, didn't get the finish for Williams. I don't think he would have necessarily stayed up there anyways if he didn't make that mistake. I just don't think the car was fast enough, but the qualifying performance alone was outstanding. So that's kind of all that happened there. Very stale GP for the next 50 laps or so. But then we move on to about with 10, 15 laps to go. Bottas on fresher tires, because Verstappen kind of pitted a little too early, I thought, when he did pit for his only pit stop of the day. Bottas and Mercedes. I mean, Verstappen's in such a no-win situation on either being in the meat and the sandwich, basically, of the 2 Mercedes cars, because he's not really in contention to catch Hamilton, but he doesn't want Bottas to undercut him. So he has to kind of play it safe and pit early, but then Bottas can go longer. And he did. I think he went about 6-7 laps longer than Verstappen.
Significant amount.
And that's huge, especially on tires. And Bottas, at the end, Verstappen's tires were gone. He had damage on the front wing, and Bottas got past Verstappen with about 6-7 laps to go, I'd say. So Verstappen would come down pit road, try to go for fastest lap. He didn't get it, but he still finishes P3. Not bad for Verstappen after having to retire last week. Bottas will get P2, and obviously Hamilton wins, but we'll get to that a little bit. Perez worked his way all the way up to P5 from starting P17. He was incredible this race. Driver of the day, 100%. And
easy.
Like, not even close. Even with his incident at the end here, which we'll talk about, he was driver of the day. It was insane to see the performance of that Racing Point. Basically a Mercedes B-Spec. And a B-Spec car from last season. So we'll get to that as well. Perez worked his way up to 5th, like I said, closing in on Albon in 4th, who was way off the pace of Verstappen on Sunday. Kind of disappointing to see Albon, really that far behind Verstappen. It wasn't really that close at all in terms of qualifying or race pace. Yeah. And Perez made a move up the inside going into, I think it's turn 4. And same incident with Albon kind of being on the outside, but he doesn't end up on the raw end of the deal. This time Perez does, and Perez breaks his front wing, and that's just kind of hanging on there. It's kind of interesting how it kind of didn't really fall off in some cases where it just doesn't go underneath the car. It was just kind of just dangling there. It was poor Perez. He'd worked so hard. He was on P4 100%, but didn't quite get the pass to work. And for the next 3 laps, he was going mightily slow. And with that, we've got the trio of Ricciardo, Stroll, and Lando Norris barreling down on the old racing point. And what a battle those last 3 laps were, because that's where the action is. I'm so glad the director of the race kept it on that battle. I did not need to see Hamilton on the final lap of the race. I know that he's won the race. So I'm glad that we were able to see the entirety of that action.
That seems like one thing that they've actually changed for this year, where they got a lot of complaints last year for focusing too much on the car leading and just kind of driving away with things. It seems like they've made an active attempt to kind of show these mid-pack battles a lot more, and thankfully they did, because this was an awesome race to the finish. Again, from Lando Norris.
Yeah. And with Lando Norris, he's in P8 with 2 laps to go, which is kind of crazy to think. So he goes into turn 3 here. We've got Stroll has been stuck behind Ricciardo for 20-plus laps. I mean, he just couldn't get past the Renault. And then Stroll sends one up the inside. They both kind of miss turn 3. Stroll ends up completing the pass. Ricciardo has to kind of let off the gas because Norris comes flying up the inside. He makes the pass on Ricciardo. Ricciardo loses 2 spots in the span of 1 corner. Kind of a rough end of the day for him after having a pretty solid performance. Norris now up to P7. Now we move. He's stuck behind Stroll there for the next lap. Not too many passing abilities. Same place. Next lap. We are on the final lap of the race. Norris makes kind of a move to the inside of Stroll in turn 3. They both kind of mess up a little bit. Stroll loses a little bit of traction coming out of 3. Norris with DRS gets around Stroll, and he's up to P6. Perez, slow as a donkey. He is absolutely snail's pace. He's stuck. He's just, he's got what he's got. He's just trying to take that car home in as many pieces as it has left. So you've got Perez and Norris coming really quickly. And I'm so glad they released the audio, the race engineer for Norris after this race, because he's coaching him through this entire last 2 stints on what engine mode to take. And I mean, I can't imagine that as a driver. Like, you're just focused, but you got to focus on your steering wheel a little bit, but you can't really focus on your steering wheel. It's so many different thoughts. It's more complicated than NASCAR in terms of how many different settings you've got to focus on.
The amount of buttons on those wheels is insane.
And how many different functions each button has. It's crazy to think how much they have to kind of memorize. And for, I think he's 19, isn't he? Yeah.
Maybe just 20.
For a 20-year-old to have to comprehend all this is pretty incredible.
Yeah, 20 last November.
20 last November? Okay. He's unstoppable right now. Austria seems to be his track, and as he's coming down to the final 2 corners, he dives bombs underneath Perez, who's going really, really slow. Lando Norris gets P5 at the Styrian Grand Prix, and then you've got a 3-wide battle at the finish line. You never see that in F1. No. We've got Perez, but he gets home in P6. Thankfully for him, he gets a decent day out of it. He could have got P4, P6. It's not too big of a difference for him. I'm sure he would have liked the P4, obviously, but damage limiting to an extent there. And Stroll comes home P7, Ricciardo P8. What a battle there at the end of the race. I missed obviously the race at the beginning in the morning because I didn't want to get up, but I didn't.
Which makes sense Twitter for you. Yeah.
As long as I could. I stayed off it as long as I could. And I'm so glad I did. And I got to really take in that finish. What a start to the season for Lando Norris. He's 3rd in points right now behind the 2 Mercedes cars.
Who would have thought?
That car is not the quickest. You can kind of see the pace a little bit more on this last weekend.
Yeah.
The McLaren is a little bit behind. The Racing Point is definitely faster than the McLaren, but Lando had a little bit of fresher tires, and he just had a faster car at the end there, to be honest. And he just capitalized on other people's battling and mistakes. And
back-to-back fastest laps for McLaren, too, with Sainz picking it up late there.
Yeah, he goes and gets fresh tires because after starting P3, he kind of really struggled all day, Carlos Sainz. Kind of a disappointing day for him after having such a strong qualifying run. So it's going to be interesting to see, if they play a little bit of more favoritism towards Lando because Sainz is leaving at the end of the season. But I don't know if Sainz really wants to leave anymore now. I don't know if I'd want to go into that Ferrari car for next season. But it was a great finish to a pretty stale race, but you're going to have those in F1. Not every single race is going to be on the edge of your seat action every second. So Hamilton wins the Styrian GP, like I said, dominant performance. No one was even in the zip code all weekend long, really. So he was out to prove something, and even though he didn't get the fastest lap, I was waiting for that, though. I was waiting for him to just put in that fastest lap at the end, like, just trying to prove a point. But he didn't quite get it this week. He's still behind Bottas in points. So, excuse me, he's got it's going to be quite the finish to see those two kind of battle it out here, because I think this could be the closest championship battle we've seen for quite some time because of the schedule length. So
yeah, the circumstances, exactly.
It is what it is. It's you deserve the championship no matter what. But Bottas and Hamilton are going to have quite the battle here. It's going to be who's ever the most consistent, to be honest, who becomes the champion this season, because a Mercedes is going to win the constructors and the drivers' championship this season. It's not even close anymore. Even after one weekend, you can kind of throw that away. So Red Bull, I think, definitely has the second best car, wouldn't you say, Kyle?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely Red Bull number 2, especially with Verstappen, really showing that true race pace as well. During this race, obviously didn't have the chance to last time out. But then after that, it's kind of open. We didn't really get to see Ferrari, obviously, this weekend and what they'd be able to do in a full race. But we saw Leclerc last week really be able to wheel it all the way up to second place. But I don't know if they're necessarily the number 3, because Racing Point has looked so good, but they've also had some issues themselves. So I think it's going to be a real dogfight for third place between Ferrari and Racing Point, because they both seem to have speed at some points, but then also not at others, but then also have seemed to have some issues, both mechanically and driver error kind of stuff. So outside of that top 2, I think it's going to be wide open and one of the best mid-pack battles we've seen in a while.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how Ferrari comes back into the pack a little bit more and how that kind of affects that entire dynamic for that, not the podium places per se, but that, 5th to 10th range for those points are going to be very crucial for the Constructors' Championship. And after the race, Renault launched an investigation on Racing Point for the legality of their car, I guess, if that's the right word for it. And the outcome of that is to be determined. They're just basically saying that they've kind of cheated a little bit in copying the Mercedes from last season, which you're kind of not allowed to do in Formula One. You can't just copy somebody else's car. It's got to be kind of your own ideas and thoughts. There's obviously going to be some, cut and paste here to a certain extent, but it's going to be interesting to see if anything really happens with that investigation. I don't know how long that will take to complete that, but they're examining, I think, the brake pads or something like that on the Racing Point. So I don't know. That's everybody's trying to get on an investigation on everybody, it seems, the past couple of weeks. First with Red Bull on Mercedes and now Renault on Racing Point. Who's next? Williams going to, argue that, AlphaTauri
Ferrari investigates themselves.
I wouldn't put it past them, an internal investigation, I'd say.
I don't know what's going to
That's kind of what it is.
Yeah, it's kind of up in the air because everyone's made the pink Mercedes jokes, but we don't really know how much of that is actually true. It seems like a fair bit of it is, but we'll have to see what the outcome is and how stiff the penalty is if they do find that it's too similar. So, that's going to be fascinating, and the timeline of that is kind of up in the air as well. Yeah,
it's to be determined, basically. There's been no news since the investigation was launched. So with that kind of concludes Austria for Formula One this season. They are done there this year. Back-to-back weekends. I'd say an overall success to have F1 back, and two pretty good races. Well, the first one was exceptional, and this one was, it's a Formula One race. It is what it is. Not every race can be exceptional, like we said. So
I think the key thing is that it wasn't the exact same race, because that's what kind of people were kind of concerned about, having the full race weekends, being able to adjust your cars and whatnot, like you can't really do in NASCAR, and going back-to-back tracks. I think the concern really was that it would just kind of be the same race back-to-back, and we didn't see that, which is good for everybody involved, because it kind of gives optimism going into the next doubleheader that we have later this year in Britain. And that was definitely my biggest concern going in. And Austria was a flying success.
Yeah, and I think what really helped was that qualifying was, rain, and it kind of shook up the results a little bit. It wasn't, it was totally different mix of cars. You had a McLaren start in P3 consecutive weeks, but it was a different McLaren kind of thing. And it was, you had a Ferrari that missed Q3 again, but it was a different Ferrari. It's all over the place, and I think F1 can take that as a positive, and hopefully there's another wet session in Britain as well to try and shake things up eventually there. So
it's Britain, so I wouldn't be surprised.
You never know with the weather out there. And with that kind of concludes the 2 weekends in Austria that we've covered. They move on to Hungary this week. There's no break in the action for F1 here. They're no holds bargain here. They're going full force here, and they're going consecutive weeks. And they move on to Hungary, which it's typically a track that's difficult to pass on as well. Red Bull is usually pretty exceptional around this track, but the Mercedes seems to be the superior car, even because Red Bull was meant to be a really good car this past weekend and Mercedes shut them up. So I imagine the Mercedes to be a really good car this weekend as well. I think Verstappen's going to be in contention for another win. I think you could see the front four almost staying the same this weekend again. I think those four are almost going to be unchanged this weekend. But you got a winner pick for this weekend, Kyle? Because there's not too much news else.
I'll go. Bottas gets back on the first place position. It really does seem like the season is going to be Mercedes dominance, which we kind of expected. Maybe a little bit more of a pushback from Red Bull. I believe Ferrari are supposed to get some scheduled upgrades coming into this weekend as well. They got a little bit, I believe, to the front wing, was it, this past weekend that they
didn't get to test it out.
They just didn't get to test it out because it was rain, and then it was destroyed on the first lap. So I think they could be a bit of a wild card going into this race, depending on what those upgrades do. But I just can't see them up in contention for the win at this point. So I'll say Valtteri gets it done.
Okay. I don't want the Mercedes to win this weekend, but I'll go with Verstappen just to try and throw things up a little bit. If I think the Red Bull is pretty consistent around here. It's got some decent speed. So Ferrari's usually actually the best car around here. In previous years, Vettel and Leclerc have been pretty strong around here in the past. Without them being there, I think this is Verstappen's opportunity to capitalize, but I'll go with him. But if it's going to be a Mercedes, I probably would go Bottas over Hamilton this weekend as well. But that's all to be determined, I guess. I'm excited to see if Red Bull can close that gap a little bit. I don't know if they have any upgrades scheduled or not, but with the track trying to play to their strong suits a little bit more, with the downforce coming in to more of a key element. Straightaway speed's not too much, so. I'm excited to see more racing. Can't get enough of it. It's gonna be fun. With that, that's kind of Formula One for the week as well. It's not too much to talk about in terms of the Grand Prix, and no new news in terms of Hungary. We'll bring you that if there is any new news by our Friday show. So we can move on to our last motorsport news of the weekend. We've got IndyCar, a doubleheader at Road America. They're trying to get back into the swing of things as well here. They've got another doubleheader coming up at Iowa this weekend. Lots of stuff going on. I mean, you get no break here. Your weekend is basically full if you're a motorsports fan.
It is.
I'm not complaining. So
yeah, exactly.
This was the first race with IndyCar where they had fans back. There was 10,000 fans in attendance at Road America this weekend, and obviously a welcome sight to see some campers and stuff out and people in their lawn chairs and stuff. So it's, I'm looking forward to seeing fans back at NASCAR races this week too, just to see just get some familiarity back and some normalcy back into motorsports. And that deserved to be mentioned with the 10,000 fans. And it seemed like it was a success, and it worked for both days. So in the first race, not too much happened, to be honest. The second race was definitely a lot better.
Yes.
Scott Dixon wins for the third consecutive race to start the season.
This guy's
he did not win the fourth. I will say that. He did not get 4 in a row, but he did get his third in a row. Unbelievable. This guy seems to be, he's on championship form at the moment. It's going to be very difficult to catch up for those points as well if he stays on his consistent basis that he always is. for his age and everything like that, that is not slowing him down one bit. And he goes 3 for 3 to start the season. He's 3 for 4 after this weekend now. Thankfully, we had a little bit of variety this weekend. And the second race was actually pretty interesting. Lots of pit strategy there at the end. Will Power, made a couple mistakes on the first lap, getting into Ryan Hunter-Reay and Graham Rahal. Both of them would be out of the race. And Power had a penalty or something like that, right? Drive-through?
Yeah, I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, so Power going for blood, I guess, after finishing, I think it was second on Saturday. Kind of a rough start to the day there for Will Power. We kind of move on a little bit there to the final bit of the race here. This is
awesome final portion of the race.
Me and Kyle were texting back, do you think, it came down to Felix Rosenqvist and Patricio Award. They're looking for their first win. These two guys deserve it. Rosenqvist especially. I don't know how he hasn't had a win so far in his IndyCar career.
So unlucky.
Yeah, very unlucky with either reliability or just circumstances not going his way. And I'm so happy to say that Felix Rosenqvist is a winner in the IndyCar series after this Rosenqvist try and hit there at the end. He had to catch up. I think it was like 8+ seconds back of Award.
Yeah, it was a decent margin.
He ran him down because Award, along with having a little bit of older tires, got stuck behind Daly, and he wasn't going to cut him any breaks after the previous week. So it was pretty interesting there at the end. I honestly didn't think he could catch him. Kyle didn't think he could catch him. But in the end,
the tire fall off was too big. He got caught up behind a couple guys and just couldn't keep up. And Rosenqvist goes flying by.
Yeah, it was a really good camera angle too in that battle. I love that they stayed on board with Rosenqvist and they had like the side by side. They're panning over to Award, seeing how close they were. It was an awesome finish. Rosenqvist gets past him with 2 to go. Award couldn't do anything to stop him. Rosenqvist seemed to have the fastest car, to be honest, all day. Just didn't quite get in the right circumstances. Award was just in a better track position. Was better on track position wise. So that's basically IndyCar as well. I mean, the Road America, it's a great track. Very long, definitely long laps. Lots of opportunities to pass. It gives a lot of variety in terms of results. We saw that with a doubleheader again. With F1 kind of having 2 different results. IndyCar had 2 different results for their doubleheader at Road America as well. So it was, thankfully Scott Dixon didn't go 4 for 4, even though it would have been a great part of history. I like to see a little bit of different winners, especially in most series. So what are your thoughts on the IndyCar race, Kyle?
Yeah, obviously the first race wasn't overly fantastic. Dixon going away with another win, but that second race was really, really strong. And seeing two relative newcomers, obviously Pato O'Ward has a couple races, but this is his first full season with the new McLaren. And then Felix Rosenqvist was a rookie last year, second year this year. Those two are going to be 2 big names going into the future of IndyCar. Pato O'Ward, obviously much younger, still only 21. Has had that track record in Indy Lights, the Formula One ties, all that kind of stuff, and driving for the new McLaren team. And then you've got Felix Rosenqvist, who really seems like he's going to be the successor to Scott Dixon once he eventually, seems like eventually. I don't know if it's a certainty at this point, but once he eventually starts to decline and eventually retires, because he is 40 plus or almost 40 years old at this point. So, Felix Rosenqvist and Pato O'Ward, I feel like we're going to see a lot more of those two going into the future. And just looking at the IndyCar standings right now, you've got Colton Hurd a second, and you've got Pato O'Ward tied for third. And those are 2 guys who are under the age of 22. So that's very impressive stuff from those 2 to start this year. Given the circumstances, how kind of crazy the season has been to this point, with the exception of Scott Dixon, those 2 have been very consistent. And, great starts for them. And we'll see how the season progresses, because one big difference between IndyCar and NASCAR is that it's a lot easier to make up ground in IndyCar because the points hauls are so much bigger. And so if you have somebody ahead of you that has some issues, you can make up a ton of ground in just one weekend. And I feel like we're going to see a lot of that going forward just because there are the schedule is so congested. We're going to see maybe some reliability issues, more and more incidents. And this is shaping up to be a very interesting IndyCar season. Scott Dixon has gotten out ahead, but given Herta, given O'Ward, and then the regular ones like Pagenaud, Newgarden behind them, it's going to be a fascinating fight throughout the season.
Yeah, the future of IndyCar is very bright, and we've seen that after this weekend and this battle for the win. So, especially with Colton Herta up there in second, I didn't actually realize he was in second in points. It's pretty impressive for him. Kind of been under the radar in terms of his results, I guess, to get to that position in points. And obviously with Pat O'Ward and Rosenqvist has just been unlucky again this season in terms of his finishes, but he definitely has the speed to be in that top 5 in points. So. Like we've said, the future of IndyCar is very, very bright. Even when Scott Dixon does eventually retire or decline, we have a lot of new and young faces that can carry the spotlight of the sport, and that's only for the best. So,
absolutely.
With that kind of wraps up all of the news we have. Let's just take a quick.
As per last week.
Is there really?
I do have a couple. Nothing big, but. Richard Petty Motorsports has added a new sponsor, Cash App. Will be sponsoring them for a couple races the rest of this season. A full green paint scheme looked kind of unique, to say the least, with the 43. They're definitely not something I'm used to seeing, but Cash App's first ever sponsorship with a professional sports team and first athletic sponsorship. So great for Richard Petty Motorsports to grab a new sponsor like that, and one that's actually going to be title sponsoring the car for a couple races, which is big to see. And NASCAR, surprisingly, will not be issuing penalties for Gregson and Burton, but did penalize team owner Anthony Clements $10,000 for non-compliance with essential personnel roster rules under COVID-19 guidelines. So I assume that had something to do with the 51 car in the Xfinity series, maybe the team owner being in like the garage area when he's a non-essential personnel and not supposed to. I would imagine it's something along those lines, but a little bit surprised.
$10,000 for that kind of team is pretty substantial.
Yes, definitely laying down the law there, but definitely surprising to see no penalties for Gregson and Burton there.
Yeah, especially with Gregson not wearing a mask. If you're going to, I'd imagine they would have talked to both of the drivers to give them a warning or something like that. But I'm honestly a bit surprised that they didn't get some sort of fine or something, because I think there's been multiple occasions this year where a driver would have dropped or put up the fisticuffs.
Absolutely.
With Logano and Elliott coming to mind, if anything, after Bristol there, if that was going to happen, or maybe even Chase Elliott and Kyle Busch. But obviously that Chase wasn't really close to Kyle in terms of, after the race. So yeah, that's kind of surprising news, to be honest. So I guess it is what it is. NASCAR's the boss. They know what they're doing.
Back-to-back weeks, really a couple, not necessarily breaking, but new news things as the show's going on, which is nice to see. But yeah, that about wraps it up for this week.
Yeah,
not for this week, but for this episode, because we'll be back later on.
Yeah, this episode, that's basically all the news we got for you on this week's episode of The Green Flag. Thank you so much for listening. We really appreciate it. We will be back later this week to recap the All-Star race and give you a Texas preview. We'll keep it to NASCAR strictly for that, unless there's any other new news that comes out. So be sure to stay tuned for that. And with that, we are signing off for now. I've been Lucas Wacker. He's been Kyle Cushman. We will talk to you later this week.